welcome to the new decade. And welcome to your Public Works Gang Reduction Committee, first one of this decade. I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Members Rube, Buscaino, and O'Farrell. And we'll start out with a general public comment. Seeing no general public comment is closed. And we'll see, are there any multiple comment cards?
No, Mr. Chair.
Multiple comment cards are closed. Unless there is an objection from colleagues, I'd like to move items 1, 2, 6, I'm sorry, not 2, right? We're going to take that after 1, 6, and 7 on consent. Okay, seeing no objective, it's been moved, seconded. That'll be the order. And we can now move on to item 3. Why don't we do, actually, well, yeah, we'll go ahead with 3. We'll do 3, 4, 5, and 2. Because I know the BOE folks have somewhere they've got to get to. So let's, if you could read item 3 into the record, that would be great.
Okay. Item number 3 is the report from the Bureau of Engineering in response to a 18-19 budget recommendation relative to the feasibility study that addresses the closing of the bike path gaps.
I don't know if your mic is on. Your mic, I don't think, was on when you were reading. Sorry. Okay, now again.
Thank you. I'll read that one more time. It's a report from the Bureau of Engineering relative to a feasibility study that addresses the closing of the bike path gaps in the San Fernando Valley.
And just before you get started, I mean, this is a priority for me, and I know a lot of others, getting this bike lane. The only way to make bicycling a viable transportation alternative is to build the infrastructure that's safe and easy to use. So we're thrilled that you're here, and Mr. Weintraub, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Deborah Weintraub, Chief Deputy City Engineer from the Bureau of Engineering. So I'm here just to give you an update from the budget hearing from a year ago on the bike path along the river in the San Fernando Valley and filling the 13 miles of gaps. I'm sure that you recall we worked with your offices to do a feasibility master plan, which we completed a little over a year ago, which gave us a real path forward for where the bike path ought to happen to fill the gaps in the valley. The first segment of that gap closure is happening in the far west San Fernando Valley, which will take folks from Van Alden all the way to Balboa and connect people into the Sepulveda Basin. That segment, which is about 3 miles, which includes bike path, greenway, lighting, and approximately 5 street ends and undercrossings under existing bridges, is in design. Our schedule shows us completing design sometime next year. We believe we'll be done by the end of this year. We have a lot of oversight agencies like the Corps of Engineers, Regional Water Quality Control Board, County of LA, who will need to look at the designs. But I'm hopeful that we can put it out to bid early 2021 and be in construction by mid-2021. The next segment we're proposing to do is segment 8. There were 9 segments identified in the feasibility study. The question that the budget committee had for us is if funding's identified to complete all the segments, and the short answer is no. We do not have funding identified to complete all the segments, but we have identified sources of money. We were very successful with the last active transportation grant program to get money for these first 3 miles, and we're anticipating applying again. I think the next cycle is due July of this year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. So in terms of when we need the funding by to keep on schedule, are you saying that if we apply in July, that'll keep us on track?
If we applied in July and were granted more money for these first 3 miles, that would keep us on track, yes.
And the expected completion date for phase 1?
Actually, I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't have that at my fingertips. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then for BOE, does a continuous bike path mean that there's going to be undercrossings at all the intersections?
Some of them are undercrossings. Some of them, I think there's one bridge planned, and some of them will be at-grade crossings across streets. We chose a master plan scheme which we thought was most cost-effective. So they're not all undercrossings.
But they all include a way to get there directly without having to go all the way to Ventura Boulevard or some crazy thing like that?
They all give you a continuous path. When we got to the Sepulveda Basin, we decided that it was more cost-effective to utilize existing on-street bike paths to get through and around the Sepulveda Basin.
And then the expected completion date for the full project?
Our target was 2028, and that remains our target.
Okay, we want to, obviously, there's some Olympic activities going on in the basin. It would be great to have it done. I don't see any reason why we couldn't have it done well before then, but certainly that would be an artery to get to and from the Olympics.
Right. Right. It's funding dependent, but that is why we chose the first segment, which connects you from the West Valley into the basin.
Great. Colleagues, any comments or questions? Mr. Root.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm very excited about this. And I recall back in, I think it was 2017, right, when we first, when the various council districts put in money, and I think the board, Supervisor Sheila Kuehl also put in a huge chunk of money as well to make this happen. So, how do you read this map? This is a great map. How do you, so how do you know what the segments?
So, Councilmember, if you look at the numbers in circles below the cost,
Oh, okay.
that's the segments, and there are 9 segments that make up the gaps along the river bikeway in the valley. And the segments we're currently doing are segments 1 and 2, which are 3 miles, that we're currently in design on.
So segment 1 and 2, where does it correspond to on the map?
It's actually what's right above it. So it's the dark blue that goes from Van Alden to Balboa.
Okay, so segment 1 corresponds. So you're basically starting up when in CD3, coming down to CD6, and then so you're basically going from the valley to the city.
Yeah. But our next proposed segment is segment 8, which, if you leap over to the right of the diagram, you see is in CD2.
All right. Oh no, I'm not trying to. I'm not. I'm not trying to do the whole which districts are included first, but I just wanted to get a. So the time frame is the first segment is going to start in the valley side, but then I also heard that it's going to start on the zoo side, right, or the Griffith Park side, and are they going to come together and meet? Or?
So we're starting in the West Valley to connect to some existing bike paths and also to give a path from the West Valley into the Sepulveda Basin. And that gives us a very long segment from Van Alden all the way around till you get to Noble Avenue. Yeah. The reason we propose to start design on the next segment, on segment 8, is it connects to some existing bike paths. So whether we continue to kind of close coming from the end is open to discussion.
So I'm a little. So what I'm trying to get at is, are you coming from the north and the south and meeting in the middle, or are you just doing hodgepodges in the middle to connecting existing bike lanes?
Right now, we're proposing to come from the north and south and meet in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And so since 2017, is this the first time we're doing it, or have we already been doing segments throughout in the past couple of years?
We have done segments out in the valley as part of other grant funds that we've been given and as part of some of our bridge projects. So we've looked at every opportunity to do segments along the river. Our biggest challenge right now with existing segments is maintenance, because as a city we have a variety of agencies who are responsible for maintenance, and with the homeless issue that we're facing, we're having difficulty keeping the bike paths well maintained, and that's the next issue we as a city really have to address.
Okay. So we have been working since 2017 with the goal of finishing by 2028.
That's right.
Great, thank you.
Joe Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great work, Deborah and Bureau of Engineering. This is fantastic. It's ambitious, but it's moving along beautifully, it looks like. Not inexpensive, but definitely worthwhile. A couple of quick questions. This all connects with existing river bike path, is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you describe roughly what percentage of this entire new stretch of bike path all the way deep into the 3rd Council District? It's probably going to be a mix of protected and unprotected bike lanes. Can you talk about that and how that impacts the costs?
So our goal is to have dedicated bike paths and dedicated walking paths. That's somewhat dependent on the width of the right-of-way at different segments of the river. It looks like the majority will be able to do that. Where we can't do that and do a Class 1 bike path, and the walking path will have to be included as part of the bike path. But our goal is standard bike path and dedicated walking path. I can't give you the exact percentage off the top. Yeah, sorry.
But it's a mix.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
a mix.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And actually, I mean, the map really should start over at the headwaters on Canoga, where we have some existing paths we put in the last couple of years that start at the headwaters and then go to Van Alden and then go.
Yes, you're right, council member. It should start over there. Yeah, there are some existing paths there.
All right, great. Well, this is recommended for note and file unless there's another comment. Ms.
Can we connect the bike path to the port
Absolutely, council
all the
member.
way down to 15? Okay.
Yeah. We're happy to do
It's
it.
on the way, right? I mean, it will get there.
Yeah.
All right, so without objection, we'll note and file. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next item is item number 4. If you would read that into the record, please.
Item number 4 is a report from the City Administrative Officer relative to the Capital and Technology Improvement Policy. This has also been referred to the Budget and Finance and Information Technology and General Services Committees.
I should say I appreciate you being here. You know, every year during Budget Committee, I always bring up this issue of we have our capital infrastructure fund. What about our digital infrastructure? And we need to create that as a goal as well. And this is starting us down that pathway, which I think is great. And we can talk about the right percentages and all of that, but I appreciate that we're starting to look at some of our technology infrastructure as well and baking that into our goals. So please, the floor is yours, Ms. Hopp.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kay Hobb with the Office of the City Administrative Officer. Before you is the proposed Capital and Technology Improvement Policy Report, which would guide the city's process for planning and prioritizing funding for city's new capital and technology projects, as well as the ongoing capital repair and maintenance of the city's existing assets. So the current policy is included as part of the city's financial policy adopted in 2005, which only provides a brief overview of our existing practices and procedures. So the significant changes recommended here are the addition of the technology infrastructure as a component of the city's capital program, and also to approve a minimum investment target of 1.5% with a goal of 2% of general fund revenue for capital and technology projects starting in fiscal year 2021, which will be adjusted periodically as additional metrics become available. So overall, the proposed policy reflects our current practices with greater level of transparency by outlining evaluation criteria for citywide investment priorities. So subject to the adoption of this report, the CAO would develop and implement procedures, and the overall process will continue to follow the city's annual budget budget process. The more detailed timeline will be provided in the procedures, and we'll also go ahead and try to clarify the reporting guideline as well. So, and we'll also resume the publication for the 5-year plan in starting fiscal year 2021-22 as well. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Can you explain what are the types of technology infrastructure projects that are going to be constructed as a result of this plan, and what projects or needs have been identified that this funding could actually be used for, and what can't it be used for?
So I'll briefly speak on that, and then we also have staff from our office to answer those additional questions. So the technology infrastructure is included on page 10 of the attachment A. So it includes the core technology infrastructures and citywide system replacements as such. So in terms of the funding, yeah.
Good afternoon, council members. Melissa Velasco with the City Administrative Officer. I work on technology projects with the CAO in conjunction, obviously, with ITA. So there are obviously a number of projects that would go under this. Really what we're doing is putting a structure to the way that we budget for technology projects that we haven't had in the past. So today a technology project comes through the city's normal budget process, but maybe there's not a holistic look at that sort of planning strategically for technology projects. ITA does a great job of putting forward what they think are the city's priorities, but as you know, we have a number of different city departments, so we're really kind of trying to collect that into one. Some specific projects that would be going forward are some that you're very familiar with. So for example, annually we've been doing some radio tower infrastructure for the police and fire department communications, so that might be one project that would be continuing for this. Another large citywide system that we're in just beginning the process to replace is our payroll system. So we're doing a human resources and payroll project, so that would obviously be a significant cost in the next few years. So it would really be any technology project that meets the criteria in the report, which is outlined as something that's having a significant impact to the overall city, typically something that would be a cost of over $1 million. We wouldn't be including sort of the typical or standard technology. For example, it wouldn't include personal computers, it wouldn't include cell phones. Those aren't the sort of holistic large projects we would be looking at. It really would be sort of the strategic investments on the city to make sure that our technology and our digital infrastructure is where it needs to be.
Does the CAO anticipate that the 1.5 to 2% funding will be increased in future years? How quickly do you think we'd be able to assess whether another increase is necessary? Does this actually cover our infrastructure and technology needs?
Yes, overall our infrastructure system needs more funding, definitely. So we have not fully assessed all the needs at this time, as this is just a very starting point. So since our economic condition fluctuate from year to year, we don't want to set a level that's not attainable when we face economic downturn. However, we'll revisit and make sure that we adjust it accordingly periodically as additional metrics become available, and we welcome any support for additional funding in the budget.
Bernice Holland, CAO. Just to add to that, one of the values in resuming the publication of the 5-year plan is it helps give us a full inventory of our needs. We plan that as we're going forward over the next couple of years, we will get a better idea of what our full needs are by asset class, and then we would begin setting metrics and strategic goals specific for each asset class. So this is just a starting point to ensure that we have additional resources beyond what is currently available. But to answer your question, it is not enough to address the deferred needs that we know of at this point, and the 5-year plan that's attached to the report gives some indication of what our identified needs are at this point. But going forward, as I said, as we get more information and refine the strategic plans that we would define for each asset class, we would bring that information to council and make additional recommendations. This is really just a baseline of getting us started going forward.
Thank you. Colleagues, additional questions, comments? Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Bernice, and thank you, team, CAO team. It sounds like you're establishing a framework of anticipated for finances to fulfill the anticipated need over a 5-year period. Is that fairly accurate?
We're never going to address our full needs within a 5-year period, but
Right.
the 5-year period is simply for planning purposes. Usually your average project is going to span about 3 to 5 years when you track it from design to construction, allowing for various delays that may occur for any individual project. So it's a planning tool. It allows you to have an outlook of what our needs are for the upcoming year, and it helps you to better prioritize how you commit funding in the current year, knowing what other competing priorities there are.
But you talked about the deferred maintenance. So this target of from 1% up to 2% is based on some evaluation you've done on the current need, no doubt, right? So
The 1% is our existing capital investment. Deferred maintenance is only a component of our overall program that deals with capital improvements, infrastructure upgrades, and now technology. When we reviewed what our current funding is, both the 1% that's provided in the CIP and the additional funding that's provided for the various technology projects that receive funding in the current year, we're at a 1.5% level of investment in terms of our current present day general fund dollars that are going into these various projects. So we're recommending that as a minimum baseline and a target of 2% just to essentially give us additional resources while we develop these greater, strategic plans by the individual asset classes.
Okay, and no doubt this is making its way through the budget requests for the next fiscal year, et cetera. It'll go through the Budget and Finance Committee as well, where you'll be able to continue making the case for this larger expenditure just to satisfy your needs in terms of the information technology, as you said, across the various departments.
Yes, we're going to go, we're essentially pursuing the same path that we always have in terms of considering funding requests. We're not really changing anything in terms of the budget process. This is just really providing a greater level of transparency in terms of the criteria that we're considering. And like I said, resuming a 5-year outlook to give you more than just a 1-year window of what we're dealing with. But at any given point, we do expect that our revenue conditions and also our asset needs are going to change on a year-by-year basis. And so that's why, as part of the policy, we don't actually state a specific percentage in the policy. The percentage is stated in the report to give council the discretion to change that as the needs arise.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buscano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the report. As you know, technology is ever evolving. Do we have a plan on reassessing our needs every so often, perhaps annually, once this policy is in place?
Let me defer again to Melissa.
Just want to be more proactive in light of how technology is ever.
Right, of course. So, what we're talking about here today is sort of our plan is looking forward on a 5-year basis, but every year we would be looking at what are we investing in the current year, is that still what we should be investing on, and then sort of revising the plan as things go. Because as you stated very aptly, technology changes a lot, and we want to make sure that the city is sort of keeping up with that to the extent that we can. Right now, what we're really focusing on is just putting a structure to how we budget for technology so we can kind of look at it a little more holistically to help facilitate that more global, broad-based review.
Thank you. And I want to thank your leadership, Bob, on, I know we're always talking about capital improvement plans. I believe you and the team here at CAO wanted to make sure we included that technology piece as well. So I was at LAADC this morning and talking about the blue economy, and actually I mentioned your effort in leading the city for bringing forth broadband infrastructure and installing broadband throughout our city to help our innovation districts move forward throughout the city. And I just want to commend you, Bob, for your leadership on raising the bar and elevating the discussion here.
Additional comments, questions? Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When it comes to technology improvements, what are we doing about the old technology? I mean, like more the hardwire stuff. Do we sell it back, donate it back, recycle it back? I mean, do we have a?
I'm going to have to defer.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Laura Ito with Information Technology Agency. ITA proactively is replacing obsolete equipment on a continual basis. Especially our network infrastructure, it's very important that we do that. But really that infrastructure has no value. It's already beyond its useful life. The vendors are no longer supporting it, so it's not something that has any salvage value.
No salvage value at all? I mean, so do we just junk it, or do we recycle? Is there any kind of recycling of any kind?
We work with General Services for our city salvaging process. I meant more like the selling it, salvaging.
Because I know our former council president had the computer giveaway program where I think we salvaged some, not old, but the latest technology computers that are still very usable. So does that fall under your purview, or?
Yes, it does. Yes, ITA was instrumental in running that project, working with a nonprofit that did the actual wiping of the computers. What we found, though, was that although people were appreciative of receiving those computers, they were really, pretty low value and low usage for those students, and we were able to get very low cost laptops that we're trying to give away through that program. We've asked for a small amount of funding for that this year, but we're able to get devices for under $100 a piece. So that plus a hotspot is really what we're thinking is going to be of more use, because the hotspots are actually donated through a vendor.
And are cell phones part of the whole ITA? You guys review
Yes.
all of that too as
Yes.
well? Yeah, it's kind of fortuitous. We'll follow up with your, I think my office has already followed up because recently I just was in touch with a company who wanted to buy old cell phones or old technology stuff and repurpose. So if we could look into that to see, even if it's minimal cost, or maybe if we could even donate it to a nonprofit who can recycle it for some sort of fee, that would be an added benefit as well.
Certainly, we'd be happy to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to adopt the recommendations in the CAO report. Seeing no objection, that'll be the order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
That brings us, I believe, to item number 5. If you could read that into the record.
Item number 5 is a report from the Board of Public Works relative to the financial status of the Public Works Trust Fund number 834 for the fiscal year end June 30th, 2018.
Great. Dr. Campos, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fernando Campos, Executive Officer with the Board of Public Works. Pleasure to be before your committee today presenting the item for the financial status report for the Public Works Trust Fund number 834 for fiscal year ending June 2018. Although I understand it's a little dated at this point in time, being that it's January 2020, I thought it would be great to present just a quick overview of what the Public Works Trust Fund is and provide an update of where we are with some of the initiatives that we've been doing over the last year and a half. Just to give you an idea, the Board of Public Works was requested back in 2007 from the City Council to report back on an annual basis. Also, the charter requires us to provide annual reports on the operating functions and some of the activities that the Board of Public Works is doing. Therefore, that's why you have the item before you on an annual basis. The Public Works Trust Fund is a trust escrow account. It's an account that holds about 97% of all funds that are deposits from depositors, trustees, permittees, and these are monies that are used for a specific purpose. They're not used for operating purposes. They're for a specific purpose. It also holds about 3% of receipts from violations, fees, settlements, surcharges, and donations. Again, it's only 3% of the entire bucket. The entire bucket right now, as of June 2018, the balance was $131.9 million. It has been a balance that has been increasing over the last 5 years, and again, it has increased in June 2019, and I will be presenting that item hopefully within the next month or two before your committee. However, the item before you is as of June 30, 2018. Again, the balance was $131.9 million. In general, we did have a couple of loans that were outstanding, approximately $14.8 million. And then in addition to that, we had working capital set aside of about 25%, about $30 million. In addition to that, we had a $10 million deposit that was placed on hold for $10 million that was expected to be exonerated by June 2018. However, it did not transpire. That exoneration happened in November of 2019. So the balance has gone down since June 2018 in that respect. The top 5 accounts that have grown over the last year from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18 have been the General Improvement Guarantee account, about $3.3 million. The second balance, about miscellaneous deposits, about $1.5 million. The third account, excavation special order work orders, about $1.2 million. Vacation work orders, about $800,000, and land work order deposits, about $800,000. Those 5 accounts represents about 75% of the growth from year on year from fiscal year 17 to 18. The Public Works Trust Fund does earn interest, and that interest does go back to the general fund. We earn about $1 million per year from the deposits that we have in trust for the depositors. In addition to that, we also lend out money at times. As of June 30, 2018, we did have about 10 loans, approximately $31.8 million in loans. The loan age varied from anywhere from 1 to 14 years. The average loan was about $6.5 million. As you may recall, the City Council was very supportive in adding a position last year in our budget to have a dedicated fund manager to bring that balance down and take control over our Public Works Trust Fund in terms of the growth and also how we can utilize some of the funds to reinvest back into Public Works projects. Since last year, we were able to collect about $4.6 million from that outstanding loan. In addition to that, we were able to disperse about $4.9 million back to other projects such as the Payment Preservation Program, the Capital Improvement Program, and then we were able to fund an additional project at about $200,000. So in total, about $9.6 million worth of effort that we did from fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2019. Just wanted to highlight that simply because I wanted to say thank you for your support in adding that position, but it just really shows how an additional dedicated resource can really materialize in terms of money. These monies have been sitting there for many years. In one case, we had about $12 million sitting there since 1980. This is referred to the Nexus Study, which is referred in the report. That Nexus Study came before this committee about a year and a half ago. We were able to disperse about $4.9 million from that study. We still have an additional $6 million that we are researching, and the goal is to at least get 70–80% of that $6 million back to the council districts, back to funding projects across the entire city that are related to public works infrastructure. Last but not least, just wanted to focus on some of the next steps that we're working on for Public Works Trust Fund and how we can improve. One is we are strengthening our tracking weaknesses, and what I mean by that is that there are a lot of players when it comes to the Public Works Trust Fund. The governance of the trust fund includes 3 individuals: 1, the administrator, which is the Board of Public Works; 2, a collector, which is the bureaus that collect the money on behalf of the depositors; and 3, our accountant, which is the individuals that treat the funds and account for the funds. We are improving that process, and we are making recommendations as we go along. In addition to that, our other improvements that we're working on is work order closeouts, automating the management process, improving our interfacing between the Public Works Trust Fund and also our Public Works financial system, and then also start focusing on our permits. We do have different deposits that are coming in from various permits: B permits, A permits, E permits, U permits. Those add up to about $50–60 million that are in the Public Works Trust Fund. So the goal behind that is to make sure that we're utilizing those deposits and reimbursing back the general fund for any fees and services that are provided from those deposits as quickly as we can. On average, we are transferring anywhere from $8–10 million. Due to lack of resources, sometimes that number drops down to about $6–8 million, but our tracking record has been about $10–12 million. I believe that we can increase that, but we do need the dedicated resources, but we also need to automate some of these manual processes. So with that, the recommendations before you is to receive and file the report. 2, to reaffirm our assessment of interest on our loans. Just to give you a quick summary on that, 2017, our Board of Public Works authorized the assessment of interest on any loans that are going out of the Public Works Trust Fund. And if that money goes out to another fund that earns their interest and keeps that interest, thereby not transferring it to the general fund, our request was to get that money back in terms of the interest. That represents about $150,000 per year. It's money that the general fund is not receiving, but it's something that this council and this committee has not taken an action on, so we'd like to reaffirm that this is what we're doing, this is our current practice, and we would like to move forward in that.
Explain that again, because I was going to ask you about that, and I didn't quite understand, please. So the interest, we get $150,000 in interest?
So when we authorize any loans, and that loan money gets dispersed to another fund that earns their own interest and keeps that interest, that interest is not thereby collected back to the board, to the Public Works Trust Fund. Right. It's approximately $125,000 to $150,000 per annum that we are missing out on collections. We are tracking that interest right now. However, we have not been collecting on that interest until City Council takes an action on that.
Where is that action pending? Because I thought we did that.
No, it has not been done. So this is something that was recommended by this board in 2017. And then in addition to that, the CAO's office prepared a report for City Council. In that report, CAO's office did not make a recommendation. They made a recommendation not to assess the interest. However, at the time that City Council considered the full report, they did not take action on either the Board of Public Works report or the CAO's recommendation.
All right, well, I'll be
So it left us up in the air.
Following up on that, but out of the $131 million trust fund, there's only 150,000 interest, but that's only because you're only counting the interest that's going to an entity that's basically banking that money and collecting its interest itself.
Correct, and keeping that interest for their purpose, not for our purpose.
The vast majority of the funds is not in that category.
Correct. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe one of the arguments that was made by the CAO's office was the amount that was going to be earned was not significant enough for us to track and to collect that fees. I would argue against that to say, even if it is $20,000, $30,000 per year, it's our fiduciary duty to make sure that if there's interest being earned, that it comes back to the Public Works Trust Fund. That interest is being reinvested back to public works infrastructure projects and not being kept by another fund that it may be related to other activities. So with that, I will open it up to any further questions that this committee may have.
Great. Colleagues, any additional questions? Absolutely. Great. And you mentioned the investments to improve the deposit tracking that we're working on that. Is that was also from one of the things in the Nexus Study? Was it?
That was also something that was missed also by City Council in regards to the Nexus Study guidelines. This is a Nexus Study that came before your board probably about a year ago now. I don't recall the exact date. Our recommendation was to adopt the guidelines so that we can move those money as quickly as possible out of the Public Works Trust Fund. Those guidelines were not recommended.
So the guideline, and I'm not following it. So there were supposed to be investments to upgrade to improve the deposit tracking. You're saying that
My apologies. I was thinking the investments in terms of the Nexus Study itself. So the Nexus Study guidelines were part of our report. Those Nexus studies were not adopted by City Council, but in regards to the investment for technology improvements, those technology improvements are being funded by the Board of Public Works and working with the Bureau of Engineering so that we can get an automated process in place. We have replaced the old system, which is the Public Works Trust Fund system, with a new system that is a web-based system. So now the Public Works Trust Fund system is now speaking with our FMS system, and it's making things a little bit faster. However, there are some reconciliation issues that we are still working out the kinks and making sure that they're talking to each other more appropriately. In addition to that, there are some manual processes that we have to still work on an interface. So we are working on those investments to improve our processes, but no additional funding is required for that.
any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm going to ask that we adopt the recommendations as you stated them. Right. Oh, CLA has the recommendation. Okay, so we're talking about adopting number 1 and 4. But CLA, if you could read those into the record.
And then recommendation number 5 would be amended to read, instruct the Board of Public Works Executive Officer, the Public Works Trust Fund Manager, and the City Administrative Officer to report back to the Board of Public Works and the City Council within 120 days on the development of a cash flow model and formal lending guidelines and approval process with potential opportunity to increase the Public Works Trust Fund outstanding loan to balance ratio in alignment with the following concepts. A, assessing and collecting interest on Public Works Trust Fund loans when loan proceeds are distributed to a fund where interest earnings are retained by said fund. And B, to continuing the existing Public Works Trust Fund loan approval process, including the sunset loan approval process, a provision that would terminate a Public Works Trust Fund loan approval within a set time period when any loan proceeds have not yet been distributed for its approved purpose in order to allow other shovel-ready projects in need of temporary front funding to receive a Public Works Trust Fund loan and begin construction.
Great. So just to be clear, we're going to adopt recommendations number 1, 4, and number 5 as was just amended by the CLA as was read into the record.
Correct.
Okay, without objection, that'll be the order. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to our last item, which is item number 2, which really was beyond consent. If you could read that one into the record, please.
Item number 2 is a report from the city attorney and ordinance relative to requiring a special event permit recipients to provide equal compensation and prize money for any athletic event featuring female and male divisions.
Great. Is there any presentation on that? Or I know we've heard this item before. Ms. Buscan, I believe you had a question on this item? No? Oh, okay. Because we were going to take it on consent, but I was told that there was some questions. So if not, I'm happy to take this on consent. We've talked about this item before. This is the actual ordinance doing what we've
do have staff here, if there are questions, and Bureau of Street Services is here as well, so. But
Okay.
the committee heard the motion.
Yeah, we've heard it, we've discussed it. Well, obviously, if anyone has any questions or comments, please speak now, or otherwise.
Just a couple of the notes that I made here. The only event that we feel that have an impact on what's being proposed here would be the LA Marathon. Unless there's any other, are there any other events that we feel that can have an impact on this ordinance?
Street Services here, but as their general counsel, the LA Marathon, I mean, it's a special case because it's.
Which is already doing.
They already do it.
Equity
and,
pay.
and they the company that puts the marathon on, they actually do it. It's our event, and we hire a company to put on the event for us. But if they were to independently want to put on a foot race in the city and pull a special event permit that had men's and women's divisions that had prize money or compensation,
right,
then they would be covered.
So the 5Ks.
Yes, there have been events that take place. Rock and Roll Half Marathon.
Right.
I don't think they had prize money. If they continue to put that event on, because I'm not sure if they do, and if they had prize money or compensation for the participants, then they would be covered. But that's what this would cover.
And move recommendation.
Yeah, so it's more prophylactic for the future in terms of this stuff.
Yes. And there's the council action. It wasn't part of the original motion, but approved by council. There was a request for the CLA to prepare a report that might look at the bigger picture of what other types of things may be, something that the city would want to look at in the future. The purpose of this, as I understand the motion, was for the city to kind of lead by example, which is what this would be doing.
Thank you.
Mr. Farrell, did you have any additional?
Yeah, I think this is a great ordinance, but I would also recommend inserting the term gender neutral, male, female, and gender neutral. I just think that we have to update our language to accommodate the times we're in, and I wouldn't want to leave anything out, and
Do you want to say,
live with
would you
unintended
say
consequences.
gender neutral, would you say, or all genders?
Yeah, or
I
all
don't know.
gender identity,
Yeah,
something similar to that effect, so that we don't leave anything out.
I don't know the best way to frame it, but is that,
Yeah.
could you speak to the mic? I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I would suggest consulting with the Human Relations Commission on the proper terminology.
Deputy City Attorney Basha Jankowski, directed by council for amendments, we can amend the ordinance to include any additional terms you require.
Okay, so let's make that the order, the recommendation to amend the ordinance to include appropriate language that would include all genders and in consultation with the Human Rights Commission to get the language exactly.
Correct. Non-binary and such. Yeah.
So, yeah, the original council direction was unfortunately pretty specific on that. So
Why can't we amend it?
well, because the direction of the full council was to do that. So I think your recommendation would be to have this back to the city council, and then they could adopt that recommendation, and then we would retransmit. That would typically be.
We have to send it back to council anyway for adoption, so why can't we just amend it and then send it to council for full adoption?
I think the concern is that it was the full council's direction was specifically on the men's and women's divisions. We could take it back and take a look at that, but it's the direction. I understand the direction that the committee wants to go with that, and I agree with that actually. It's just it was the direction of the full council to do it specifically for.
Right, but we're not submitting to the full council what was directed. We're amending the motion. We're amending it.
We're amending the instruction from the full council, and then it's going to go back to council anyway.
Yeah,
We're not.
That's what
I
we're
think
talking
that's
about.
in our purview.
I'll check with Dave Michelson in our office if we can amend it at this time, and then,
yeah. Just depends
and
on do
transmit
we
it.
get a
I
full.
just don't understand how we couldn't have the power to amend anything that's coming, that before it's been adopted as an ordinance, we can amend it. The direction doesn't bind us, it just directs you to write it a certain way.
I think what we could do is we can bring this back and see what we can do to retransmit a revised ordinance. It may be that we'll request that the council adopt that recommendation, and then we'd be happy to retransmit the ordinance
Whatever it takes.
immediately.
This is not time urgent. This doesn't have to be done by next week, so
It's a
there's
good
no
request.
compelling reason to move forward with something that's not right, not perfect. So let's perfect this, and we'll send it as discussed. The only question is, how do we frame that direction here today, which is, I guess our direction is to request the city attorney to go back and work on the proper language and send it to the full council for redirection if need be, as a suggestion from this committee or a motion.
And specifically to just consult with the Human Relations Commission. And it's probably just a simple one term or a few, one short phrase, terminology to insert. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Great. And then when the CLA does its report, because they were directed to look at other events that are not, broader than the special event ordinance, that would be my recommendation.
Included in that
They would include that as well.
So is that framed properly? Do we need to reframe this, or do you have it?
I have it, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Great. Then that convoluted series of discussions will be the order, without objection. Is there anything else on the agenda that I'm missing?
The desk is clear, Mr. Chair.
Desk is clear. This meeting is adjourned. Or I should say, this meeting is adjourned. There you go.